Thank you very much, Rob, for that great introduction. As Rob said, my name is Tom Walker, and welcome everyone to adding Windows UWP in Xamarin.Forms. And so what I got in front of me here is I'm a Microsoft and Xamarin MVP. I'm active on Twitter, so you can get a hold of me at TinyToot. And I've got a URL to my blog where I do writing on basically on mobile. So let's get started. A little bit more about me. I've been at this for 15 plus years. My main focus right now is mobile web front end, and I've worked with large enterprises to small startups, building enterprise systems to consumer-facing software. And I've enjoyed every minute of this. So thankfully I get to talk about one of the things I kind of enjoy, which is Windows 10 Universal with my other favorite is Xamarin as well. So today's agenda, what we're going to kind of touch on is a couple of questions right off the bat is, what is Windows 10 UWP? And then the next question that we're going to look at is why would you want to add this to your Xamarin project? And then we'll take a look at the developer tools. That'll be covered in our Getting Started section. And then we're going to tackle a couple of scenarios. So we've got the green pasture kind of scenario where we've got a new application we're starting off. And then we'll tackle basically upgrading existing Xamarin.Forms application. And then hopefully we've got some time, we can kind of dive in a little bit into adapting that UI for our different platforms. So let's get into this. Before I get too far into the talk, we're going to kind of cover a few things here first. So this is not going to be an in-depth talk on Windows 10 UWP. There are plenty of stuff online. Microsoft has their Virtual Academy. You can kind of check that out to get some great content there. Microsoft Channel 9 has awesome videos on that. You can go back and look at previous events like the Build 2015 that kind of does a good coverage on that. I'm going to assume everyone's got some experience with Xamarin, and especially with Xamarin.Forms. Again, this is the nice selling point with Xamarin is they've got an awesome blog, they've got awesome documentation. They've also got the Xamarin University, where you can kind of cover some of the in-depth stuff there. And of course, we've got Rob there doing the courses as well. And then last is, I'm not going to get into the debate of why using Xamarin.Forms over native Xamarin development. We're just going to kind of cover that. So one of the things, the reason why I use Xamarin.Forms is it kind of allows me to roll out my ideas relatively quickly, or kind of prototype some ideas that I have. So that's kind of one of the reasons why I kind of use Xamarin.Forms. Okay, so let's tackle the first questions. So what is Windows 10 UWP? Well, what that is now Microsoft has rolled out the new operating system. So if you haven't heard, it's Windows 10, surprise. And what that is they have that now across multiple devices. We've got several devices on the screen here. So we got from the phone to basically the holograph set, HoloLens, to the big Surface Hub panel. So what Windows 10 provides is it's got that core OS running across all these devices. So as a developer on that platform, I want to kind of leverage my application to basically run as many devices as I possibly target. So one of the nice things about it is UWP has the ability to kind of adapt the UI. So when I'm developing in that platform, I think more of screen size and less about the back-end stuff as far as accessing some of the core features of my devices that I'm targeting. So again, just focusing on the screen sizes, and if I need to kind of add in additional features, if I want to take a leverage of the phone's feature set, then I would add in extensions to kind of add in the feature set to each of the devices that I'm targeting if I need to kind of get at those SDKs. Okay, so the next question that we're going to tackle is why add UWP to your app, to your Xamarin app? So let's kind of answer that question. So the first word off the top is your company has embraced Windows 10. So you need, as a developer, to kind of win that score, basically impressing your boss, impressing your fellow employees. So one way to kind of do that is to kind of roll it out using a tool like Xamarin.Forms to kind of roll that out to get it onto Windows 10 devices. The other is you want to target a new market. So right now, the Windows 10 store is pretty well virgin territory, so it wouldn't take much for a new app to kind of stand out in that marketplace, and you want to kind of leverage that. The other take on that is you have a new idea and you want to roll it out quickly, so you want to be first to market. So it's easier to establish a market as the first person in that market. And I believe we had a talk with Ali Hunter kind of talking about ways to kind of leverage how to target those markets, so you might want to kind of refer back to that. And then the big thing for me is using Xamarin.Forms makes it easy. Actually, I didn't have a whole lot of trouble with adding in my UWP into the application. And then the big thing that Rob kind of mentioned too is now we've got 200 million Windows 10 users, and they are hungry for apps on the Windows Store, and you want to kind of leverage that. Just think about that. If you only had like 5% or 10% of that market, that's huge. So you want to kind of leverage that as a developer. Okay, so let's get to what do we need to kind of get started here. Okay, first off the top, unfortunately this is a Visual Studio 2015 only story. Right now there's no support in Xamarin 4 IDE for Universal. So that's a good thing. There's some strengths in there. So if you're a Visual Studio developer, great news. If you tend to lean on the Xamarin.Forms, you're going to have to switch into the Visual Studio. The other thing too we're going to need is the Xamarin 4. And the nice thing about Xamarin 4 is it adds in support for Xamarin Forms 2. That includes preview support for Windows 10 Universal. Plus, it even adds more awesome bits. And so to get a little bit more kind of overview on that, there's a blog article on Xamarin kind of talking about some of the bits that comes with Xamarin 4. Okay, so obviously we're going to need Windows 10 to kind of be able to kind of test our application. And of course, the other thing that I mentioned before is Xamarin 4 with the latest Xamarin 4 2. We're going to need Visual Studio 2015, and of course, we're going to need the Universal Windows Developer Tools. And right out of the box, if you install the extra bits with Visual Studio 2015, that's if you go into the custom options and basically install both the Windows 10 SDK as well as Xamarin 4, you'll have all the bits as part of the Visual Studio 2015 install. Okay, so let's stop and let's look at the first scenario. So this is greenfield, I'm starting a new project, what's it take to kind of set that up? And of course, like all things in development, it starts at new project. So here on the screen, I've got Visual Studio's 2015 new project. And then here what I've got is I'm selecting the cross-platform. In this case, I'm selecting blank app. And then I'm using portable class library because all the cool kids use that nowadays. And I give it a name and carry on from there. The great thing is, right now, if you've been diligent in keeping up with the latest install bits for Xamarin 4, the templates right out of the box come with Windows 10 Universal template built in. So right off the bat, I've had all these platforms install as part of the template, which is great. However, when I tried to deploy it right out of the box, so I hadn't done any kind of custom, I got this wonderful error message on the screen. And we'll talk about that next. So what happened is, out of the box, with the template, there's a couple things we need to kind of do. We need to go into the configuration manager to kind of set a few options for our universal client. So as you can see on the screen here, I need to enable two options, and of course that's the build and the deploy. So I just need to enable that. Once I do that, recompile, redeploy, and I'm good. The other thing too, as I kind of went through kind of putting together this talk, there were updates. Didn't need it. Like I said, I was diligent in keeping up to date with some of the updates from Xamarin. There are some updates there, and we'll kind of talk about the Android bits with Xamarin.Forms. And of course, we've got the Xamarin Magic. And what I mean by that is, so what you're seeing on the screen is the main page inside our universal client. So as you can see, there's not a lot in there that we need to kind of touch on. So all I had to do in this case is just accept the template because we were at their net new project. But there's a couple things I want to kind of point out. There's some differences in the tag branch. So I got a Forms Windows page. And then the other thing you'll see here that's unique to the Xamarin.Forms is I've got this using statement to kind of include Forms support for Universal. So that's included as part of the template. So again, I didn't have to do anything for a net new project, which is great. Okay, so let's jump in to our demo. And what I'm going to do is, so let's pretend I've gone through, set up the new project. So this is what I've got. I've got a brand new project on the screen. And like I said, right out of the box, you've got support for Droid, iOS, Universal. We've got Windows 8 RT, and we got Windows Phone. That's the Silverlight there. So all that support is built in Xamarin.Forms right out of the box with the latest updates from Xamarin.4. So let's take kind of a tour of what we're seeing here. So the core of the application exists in the portable class library. So again, I'm not defining any unique business logic here. So out of the box, what I've got is here, think of the app class as the bootloader for my application. So here is where I'm going to define, my parent navigation or my starting pages here. In this case, we're defining our content page using C#. So that's what I've got in front of me here right now, and it's just basically it's just a content page. And in that content page, I've got a stack layout control, and in that control, I've got basically just a label control there. So let's run that to kind of see how that kind of resolves. Okay, nothing super sexy there, but it's a good starting point. So we know that we've got a clean setup. We can kind of proceed now to kind of adding in our logic. But let's just kind of confirm one thing to kind of make sure that this is all kind of working and I'm not kind of pulling a fast one here. So let's kind of close that. Let's make a few minor changes here. So let's just kind of make sure that this is kind of doing its magic here. All right, let's run that. Okay, so it took in the updates, great. So we know that we can make changes to it. So now we can kind of add in our business logic, add in our views. So like I said, we're not going to kind of cover that. That's more getting into the Xamarin.Forms. So I'm assuming everyone's has that knowledge already. So let's get back into the slides here. Before I leave the demo, I should kind of mention a few things. So to kind of make all of this work, one of the things I have to do is kind of activate each of the starter clients. So in this case, what I did there is set as startup. And like I said, there's not a whole lot going on here because, like I mentioned in the slides, there's changes. Like if you're familiar, if you're coming from a Windows 10 background, some of these are going to be a little bit different. Like I said, we include the using statements inside the client application for it. And then in our code behind here of that page, we're basically loading up the bootloader, in this case the app.cs, to kind of load in our main functionality or to kind of kickstart our application functionality. And at that point, Xamarin.Forms kind of takes over to kind of do the translation for us. In our next example, we'll get a little bit more elaborate in some of the screens. So we'll kind of take a look at that in our next demo. So let's get back into the slides. Okay, so we took a look at a greenfield kind of project, net new. So nothing, nothing too difficult there. And of course, we're not encountering any problems because we're not kind of upgrading any kind of NuGet packages or any kind of existing logic. So now let's kind of tackle, what it takes to kind of take on an existing project and what's involved there. So before we kind of kickstart this section here, I want to introduce our demo app. In this case, it's How to Barbecue, and this application was built using Xamarin.Forms 1.3, so it's a little dated, and I haven't been a diligent developer and kind of keeping up to date. So today I'm going to upgrade this to Xamarin.Forms 2 and kind of see what it's going to take to kind of leverage Universal within the same application as well. Okay, so before we kind of start the process of adding Universal Client to our existing application, first thing you want to do is you want to kind of make sure that your base application has been properly upgraded. And to do that, what we need to do is we need to upgrade the Xamarin.Forms NuGet packages. So what I've got on the screen now is I've gone in to my project. I'm going to update to the latest Xamarin.Forms. Now, the key thing I want to kind of talk about here, as a good developer, you should be using source control. Okay, so even before you get to this point, make sure you've got your application in source control before getting to this point. So once you get to this point, you don't want to select all the packages. You want to kind of tackle them one at a time. The reason being is each of the packages has certain dependencies. So as a Xamarin developer, we have, the more experience you get with this platform, the more you realize that there's an abstraction kind of happening here with the core Xamarin stuff. So there's a lot of libraries in play here because we've got a lot of platforms that we're trying to target. So one of the things you're going to keep in mind on this platform is you got to be careful how you apply updates to your package. You got to make sure you got the stable package here. So in this case, what I want to do is I want to update my core library. In this case, I'm looking at Xamarin.Forms. So now you got to think about Xamarin.Forms, and that's an abstraction on top of the Xamarin abstraction. So there, I'm dealing with common navigation patterns, common controls across each of the platforms. So I have to be kind of mindful of that. So when I'm doing this, I want to make sure I got in source control, my application. The other one is I want to kind of tackle these one at a time because, like I said, there's dependencies in each of these libraries. So I'm going to load them up or update them one at a time. And the reason being is when I was doing this, I encountered one issue, and that's with the current bits right now with Xamarin.Forms and the Xamarin Android bits. So right now, as it stands, the Xamarin.Forms version that's out on NuGet right now wasn't compatible with the latest Xamarin Android bit. So that's going to kind of bite you a bit. So again, be mindful of that. Like I said, tackle adding in the updates one at a time to kind of make sure you got a stable build before you kind of add in Windows 10 Universal into your solution. And of course, there's a few other gotchas here when I kind of tackle this. So because I had an older Xamarin.Forms application, one of the things that I hadn't done is inherit from the content page. So one of the things I had to do was change my views to inherit from the content page. And that gives me the binding context. And that's what was happening when I was doing the initial compile. So I had done the NuGet update, and now I've gone in and done the now I'm at the point where I'm compiling to kind of make sure everything's okay, and then I came across the error where it couldn't find the binding context. And why that was because I hadn't inherited it from the content page. So it's a minor change there that I had to add into my views. So not a difficult gotcha there. The other gotcha that I encountered was, and this was kind of an odd thing, so out of the box, Xamarin.Forms with the latest bits wants to add in these core libraries. So we were looking at Xamarin.Forms.core.design, and then the other one was Xamarin.Forms.XAML.design. And for whatever reason, I couldn't compile either my Android or my Windows Phone 8 Silverlight application, client application. So to kind of address that, I kind of logged into Xamarin.Forms, and sure enough, the answer was there. So the developers there kind of talked about having to remove these two core libraries from the two client applications. Once I had done that, I was good. So keep that in mind too as you kind of go through this process. So hopefully, if you get anything from this talk, I remove some of those pain points from for you guys. And of course, once I had a stable kind of setting, of course, next thing I want to do is check it back into source control. So you want to kind of ease into kind of upgrading it, and that's kind of with all kind of projects as you're kind of refactoring, adding updates. Keep in mind that you want to kind of be safe and check in each time you're kind of doing these changes. Then once I had done that, now I'm looking at adding Windows 10 Universal to my project. In this case, it was just a matter of adding a blank Universal Windows application to my existing solution. And then, of course, I don't think I have to harp on this one. Use best practices. There's a reason for that. The nice thing about keeping it in Xamarin.Forms was all I had to do was to kind of inherit or add in the reference to my portable class library, and that kind of contained all my business logic. In this case, I had used Xamarin.Forms to kind of define my UI in this case. So all I had to do was kind of inherit that, and I was good for the bulk of my refactoring there. There were some minor tweaks here, and I'll get into that next. So of course, one of the things I had to do was adjust the app.xaml.cs inside my Windows 10 Universal class. So in this case, what I had to do inside the on the launch event, inside the client app, is I had to kind of add in a init to kind of initialize Xamarin.Forms, and that was it for that section there. And then, of course, the next part, of course, is making the changes to the XAML, in this case, in my main page.xaml. So again, just changing the header tag there, my page tag, and then including in the using statement to kind of include the Xamarin.Forms inside that to kind of handle basically drawing up the UI for UWP. And of course, the other part is inside the main page and the code behind in that file. I also had to basically load up the framework of my application, in this case, the main app.cs, and that exists inside my portable class library. And that's kind of the bootloader of my application to kind of basically instantiate the root navigation, my starting views, and all that. So that's what's going on here. So basically, I'm loading that up inside this instance of the client application, in this case, the UWP app. And of course, last thing I needed to do was, if there was any kind of assets inside, any kind of graphical assets, I kind of had to include that as well. So that's what I'm doing here, is just kind of including the assets inside the Universal Windows application here. And with that, I'm going to get into the demo. I should pause and ask Rob if there's any questions. I see some questions up on the board there.
Yeah, there's a couple. So John asked right at the beginning, aren't we supposed to remove the grid stuff from the main page.xaml?
I didn't need to, actually, for that. Like I said, the changes I had to do was changing the page header tag and then adding in the XAML using statement. That was it. Out of the box, it was no problem. And then with the existing app, we'll kind of get into that next.
Okay.
And then
is that it for questions? No, Brian has a question too. Can Xamarin.Forms UWP apps adapt to changes in screen size? So when running on Windows 10 phone and then running the app on an external screen using Continuum, things like that.
Out of the box, no. I had to do a bit of extra work, so hopefully we got time. We can kind of cover those bits, and that's when I'm going to get into styling and basically take advantage of the Xamarin.Forms stuff. I'm crossing my fingers and hoping that the wonderful team, the Xamarin.Forms guys, add in adaptive triggers, because that would be just awesome if they can add that into that functionality. But hopefully maybe some time we'll cover a little bit about basically adapting the UI and kind of what I did to kind of make that magic happen. So stay tuned for that. So let's get into our demo here. So let's escape the slides and get into our demo. So what I've got on the screen is I've got our legacy application. So in this case, it's the How to Barbecue Xamarin.Forms 1.3. In this case, what I've done is I've already kind of done some of the upgrading. So what I've got on the screen right now is I've got it upgraded to Xamarin.Forms 2. So I've kind of gone through that, added in all the NuGet packages. So we've got a kind of a stable running copy before I kind of tackle adding in the Windows 10 Universal into the application. So let's kind of start this to kind of make sure that we've got a working copy here before we kind of tackle Universal. So let's run it inside our Android device here to kind of make sure we're good here. Okay, so great. We've got no errors in compiling. We've got our application running, which is great. So we got our main screen here, our barbecue recipes here. So if I click on that, I can kind of drill into that. Great. So all of that functionality works. So it's a good starting point. So again, keep in mind you want to kind of, as you go through this upgrade process, you want to kind of check in each time to kind of make sure you have a known good, because if you encounter an issue, it's easy to kind of roll back to a previous version that you've saved in source control. So let's kind of tackle now on adding Windows 10 Universal to our application here, to our solution here. So what I want to do is I want to kind of click on this, add a new project. In this case, I'm going into Windows, and I'm going to navigate into Universal, and I'm going to select a blank app. In this case, I'm going to give it a name. I'm going to give it How to BBQ UWP. Click OK. Okay, so we've got our initial bits loaded up. So the first thing I want to kind of tackle is I want to add in support for Xamarin.Forms into that new client apps. So I want to go into Manage NuGet Packages. In this case, I want to click on Browse. And I want to locate Xamarin.Forms. Of course, I want to kind of include that inside this client application. So I'm going to add that into my UWP app. We're OK to that. Okay, so we've successfully added into our Universal app here. So like I mentioned, we're going to do some minor tweaks to the application, so we're going to tackle that next. So the first thing that I talked about is we need to kind of add in some logic into our app.xml.cs, and this is inside our Universal client app here. And we're basically looking for the on the launch event, and then we're looking for this line to kind of add in our logic here. And I'll spare you the keystroke because I realize I'm using a mechanical keyboard, and I realize it's going to be loud. Oh, I'm going to have to type that in. Oh, wait, hang on. Helps if I get the right line here. Okay, like we saw in the net new project, all we're really adding is the initialization for Xamarin.Forms to kind of kick off inside when our Universal app kind of loads up. So that's what we need to do there. So that's kind of taken care of. And of course, the next bits, we have to kind of make the adjustments to our XAML. So that's when I'm going to go next. I'm going to go into our main page.xaml. someday this will be filled. I'm hoping someday. Of course, we have no design support for the syntax Xamarin.Forms XAML syntax yet. I'm hopeful. So like I said, we need to kind of change our tags there to our page. So we need to kind of include forms Windows page, and of course we need to kind of change our closing tag as well. And of course we need to make sure we include our using statement to Xamarin.Forms for our UWP app. So that part's done. And of course the next bit is we need to kind of load in some stuff here. We're going to load in our application again, just and of course that's probably going to error on me because it's probably expecting the Xamarin.Forms using statement for that bit. Let's see that. Oh, still building. Okay, rebuild was successful. Just want to kind of rebuild that just to kind of make sure that because I'm always a little leery when I get the squigglies under my code there. I want to make sure I got everything kind of working correctly here. While we're waiting for the compiler, do you want to tackle a few questions, Rob?
Yeah, let's do that. All right, so you already had a question. Do you have to change your portable library profile, the target, to support the new platform, Windows 10 UWP? Which PCL profile are you using?
We can take a quick look at that. To answer the question, I didn't have to make any changes to, like right out of the box, making the updates that I did here. Didn't have to make any kind of changes here. But let's just take a peek at that, kind of make sure everyone kind of sees that. So go into the portable class library, and we want to kind of look at the properties. And to kind of get at that, that's what everyone's kind of looking at right now, is we're going to, in changing that. So didn't have to add anything. What happened is when I added in support, it actually kind of includes the Windows 8 support there, and that seems to be good, which I find kind of interesting. But it didn't have any problems running on Universal. So once we get that, like I said, out of the box, no issues there. I didn't have to change this. I did find that if I tweak this, so be mindful of this again, when you're at this point, you're kind of tweaking the low-level stuff. Make sure you check in your stable working copy and just source save before going in and tweaking this, because you can unravel it really quickly. So be mindful of that. So if you do make changes here, just again, it will save you a lot of pain. It's a nice fallback to roll things back from source control. So like I said, I didn't have to make any changes to that. So let's get back.
A couple people mentioned also, if you go to your main page, it looks like maybe your closing tag is not correct in your XAML. For the window, you need the Forms : Windows page.
Yeah, thank you. Good catch. Thank you very much. Appreciate that.
Yep. And Kevin mentioned also, if you open the CS_proj file for your PCL, it'll actually show you the number, the target number. So 259 or whatever your PCL profile is. If you just look at the CS proj, the Xamarin Studio will actually show that to you in the IDE, but Visual Studio, you have to open the project file.
Ah, okay. All right, so let's rebuild this and see where we are with this. I like that when people give me feedback on coding stuff. It's really good. I like that. It's pure coding right there at its best. It might have an issue with the content page too. I might have to change that too as well.
Yeah, and another one. If you go down to your error list tab down the bottom and change that just to build errors instead of build and IntelliSense. So go down to your error list down at the very bottom of your tab, and instead of build and IntelliSense drop down, just change that just to build, and a lot of those squigglies will go away.
Okay.
And then that gives you the one actual error. Can't create an instance of a Windows page. And another comment here, the Forms project is not referenced in the UWP project. That's why it's failing to build. You go to your references.
Awesome, yeah.
The perils of live coding. It's always easy to forget something.
Yes.
This is why pair programming works so well.
Well, I mean, we've got a great audience. I mean, they're on the ball.
Yes, they are.
I'm really this is really great stuff. All right, so bear with me, folks. We'll try recompiling again. I do appreciate the feedback on the stuff. So, I mean, the thing is, you can't know everything, and it's great that we've got a great audience that are giving us this feedback because I'm getting a lot out of it. I'm hoping everyone's going to get something out of this as well.
And Brian points out too, shouldn't the main page class there inherit from window page instead of just page? Because if you look at your main page.xaml, I think that's what it's actually inheriting from.
Right. There we go. Yeah. Good stuff. Oh, and of course, the important bit that I mentioned that I forgot is you need to set the build and deploy as well. So let's see what happens here with this. Okay, well, we've got it running, so now let's see it show up our recipes there. Okay, so obviously the step I missed is adding in the images, but we got the core of the application there, so I just need to include the images, so that's not too bad. And to kind of address that, I would go into my project, add in the extra assets. So I'm going to spare people on that. I want to kind of get into talking about the styles and everything. I think that's kind of an important kind of topic to kind of cover there. Let's close this. Let's get back into our slides there. So just kind of recap. So there's a few pain points there, but nothing that was difficult for me to kind of overcome, and we had some great help with the audience kind of helping with some of those bits. So nothing too difficult. If anything, the Xamarin.Forms 2, the latest bits, makes it easy for me to kind of, adapt, adding in an existing, basically adding in a universal app into my existing solution there, which was not that painful. So let's talk next steps. So one of the things we're going to have to tackle is adapting our UI. So one of the things with Windows 10 Universal is we're going to have to look at different screen sizes because, we've got the phone, we've got tablets. So to kind of help with some of that, Xamarin.Forms has styling. So you can use styling with inside Xamarin.Forms to kind of help with some of that. So I'll kind of talk about that in the next example. What I've got here is basically a link to Xamarin documentation, kind of introducing styling. I'm not going to get into too depth on that. I think that documentation does a fair better job than getting into some of the details about using that. I'll cover some of that in our next demo here. The other thing you can leverage too is the on-platform keyword. So you can use that both in your XAML. So when I'm defining my XAML tags, I can kind of define it. So basically I can kind of control attributes, or I can customize font size, coloring. So I kind of use that in the next demo, so we'll go through that. Again, I've got a demo pointing to a Xamarin document to kind of outline using that. And the other thing too is you can also use this in your C# code as well. And of course, the other thing too is if you can't get the look that you want, then you might have to consider creating a native page. And so again, the nice thing about Xamarin.Forms is it's kind of that iterative process where I can get up to speed. I can release an app in Universal, and then when I have more time to invest on it, or if I got more market interest in my app, then I can kind of do some development interest, or basically invest more into the development of the application. So in this case, I might leverage building native screens, and that's across all the platforms as well. And one of the things you want to do is you want to kind of release quickly to the market to kind of engage your users on how they're using the application, because sometimes you don't really know how they're going to interact with the application. So it's good to kind of get your app into the user's hands as quickly as possible. So let's tackle the first two things in the next demo here. And I'm going to cheat in this demo here. I've already kind of done all the hard bits. There's a couple of changes that I've done to the application. So this is the next step. This is using styling, and I made a few minor changes. So instead of an app.cs, I migrated to an app.xaml.cs. And one of the reasons being is I want to kind of possibly leverage using the global namespace for my application, so I can define global styles here. In this case, I didn't, because I didn't really need to. One of the things that they remind people is keep in mind that you're dealing with mobile devices with a limited resource. So there's a bit of overhead for the application to kind of navigate through the control stack to get at styling. So what you want to do is you want to kind of put your styles as close to the pages that use it. If you find that using the same style, then yes, there might be a story there to kind of put it into the application global space. In this case, I didn't. So that was the only change I did there. Let's take a quick peek at the app.xaml. I just want to kind of point this out really quickly. One of the things that I did here, and this is kind of outside of using styling and the on-platform keyword here, is I put in a static property. So in this case, is Windows 10. So I'm using that inside my universal application to kind of trigger when I'm running that application to kind of activate my UI in a different way, and I'll show that when we get into that application, to that client. So let's get into that. So let's tackle styling. So to define styling, what I had to do is inside my pages recipes page, what I had to include is basically a content page resource tag and add in my resource dictionary. So in here, I'm defining a few things. Basically, I'm defining set colors. In this case, that's blue, and it's a set blue in hexadecimal. I'm using keyword white for my text color. And then next, following that, is I've got an implicit style for my label. So no matter what label I have, it's going to inherit that style. In this case, I'm referring back to the white text color. And the other thing is, I'm setting a background style, and I'll show you how I'm kind of using that next. And then for the on-platform keyword, what I'm doing is I'm adjusting the height, or sorry, the width of my image. So when I'm running in iOS, I'm setting the width to a fixed one. This is probably not recommended. I would probably get a more responsive design on my image, but in this case, I just kind of want to show how to kind of apply the on-platform keyword inside XAML. So that's what I'm doing here. So the other takeaway from this is so you see the different platforms. So I've got iOS, I've got Android, I've got Windows Phone. So keep in mind that's going to trigger for both my Windows Phone Silverlight client app as well as my Universal app. So keep that in mind. Okay. So let's navigate inside the code behind for that page. So I talked about the static variable there. So let's kind of navigate to that first. So where I'm going is I'm going inside my UWP main page. So here I'm actually setting the value true for that static property, so that I know that I'm now active inside my Universal client app for my application. So I leverage that here. I say, well, if I'm running my Universal app, what I want to do is I want to change my grid style to use the background style. In this case, it's going to set it to blue. So I'm going to have my grid set to blue, and I'm going to have white text for my label. If I'm running in any other platforms, and not recommended practices, but you'd want to tweak this a little bit more, I want to set my text color. So I'm setting that page resource to my text color to black. So that's what I'm doing there. So let's take a look at that. Okay, so this time around I've added in my images, so you can see that they're a little bit bigger here inside my Universal app, and I've got the blue grid, and now I'm using the white text. If I were to run this in iOS, I would have the white background with the black text. So I can kind of do simple UI changes there. Now, if you find that you just can't get the look that you want, so then that's the story of, okay, do I have enough user engagement? Is there enough of an investment for me to now recode the UI in a native way? But the nice thing about it, because I've got separation of my business logic, I can kind of tackle creating each screen separately. So that's the nice thing about kind of doing this approach. I can kind of get my app out quickly, get my user using it, get feedback, and then at that point I can kind of decide, is there enough of an investment for me to kind of get back my development here? So that's it. Like I said, the nice thing about using Xamarin.Forms, it kind of allows me to kind of do that rather quickly. And like I said, we kind of covered through some of the pain points, and you guys helped out with some of the coding points that I had in the talk. That wasn't really that bad, actually, to kind of make those changes there. So let's get back to the slides. So I'm going to pause there. Let's kind of get back to any questions on that piece there.
We just have one question right now. Brad asked a little bit ago, when designing for the Xbox One, is that a completely different UI needed from Windows 10, or can Xamarin.Forms XAML views be shared there as well? How much code reuse would there be if you're targeting that completely different platform?
You know what? I tell you, even Microsoft doesn't really have an answer to that story. I mean, they've been saying that they're going to release, they're going to allow developers to basically code for the Xbox. Right now, there's no story even on the native side. So if I'm creating my apps inside Windows 10 Universal, there's no story yet for Xbox. They haven't released it. I would love them to just release it on a hobby level. Like, don't worry about the store. At least allow me to kind of, as a developer, kind of play around with the Xbox. I'd kind of like to get to that where it's on that, at least a hobby level, where they can kind of, I've got my own box, and I can kind of open up my developer mode on my box. I would like to at least see that. But right now, even Microsoft doesn't have an answer to that story yet. I'm hoping it comes soon with the next build, but we'll see.
Okay. And it looks like we got about 10 minutes left, by the way.
Yeah, so I think we are kind of at the end here. So I'm just do a quick review of what we kind of covered. So we talked about what Windows 10 Universal is. So again, that's the new developer model that Microsoft rolled out. So that's again using Windows 10 4 across all those devices. And basically Universal is the way in which developers can then target those devices, keeping in mind that they're looking at adaptive UI. And then we tackled the other question of why you'd want to add Universal to your project. Again, you've got those couple scenarios as your businesses move to Windows 10, you got to roll an app quickly. So Xamarin.Forms kind of offers that ability for you to kind of roll out your application quickly. You're trying to prototype a new product to a market, or you want to kind of take advantage of a new market, in this case the Windows 10 store market. Like I said, it's a brand new market, and it doesn't take much to get noticed in that market, so that's something you want to kind of leverage. And then we covered steps to, we first looked at all the tools that we need. So basically, right now, as it stands, it's a Visual Studio 2015 story. You need Xamarin 4. Definitely need Windows 10. And you need to make sure that you've got the Windows Universal SDK installed. We took a look at the Greenfield kind of new project. So again, steps involved in there. We looked at the existing app. You guys helped out in a big way to kind of get us past that, so appreciate that. So no real pain points there. Again, just best practices. Separate your logic into using developer patterns. The important takeaway there is use source control. And then the last thing we kind of looked at just quickly, basically quick ways of kind of styling your app. So we looked at defining style sheets to the pages, and then we looked at the on-platform. And that's kind of the wrap from that. And I'll pause to wait for other questions. If not, I will hand it back to Rob.
I think actually just one more question. Stefan was asking, are we going to be able to get your slides? Can I put those up on our site?
Yeah, I'm going to share all this stuff out. I want people to play around with this. The nice thing about this starter application, like I said, it's starting from Xamarin.Forms 1.3, so that you can kind of work through the upgrade. And there's not a lot of advanced bits in there, so you can kind of play around with it. And the nice thing about it is I can kind of do the styling and kind of do, what if I change this, and not worry about a lot of plugins getting in the way. So it's a nice little sort of app to kind of test some of the stuff before you tackle your main applications. So no problem sharing that. Now I'll hand that off to Rob.
Yeah, so the slides and the sample code we'll put up on our Xamarin University site when we upload the recording as well of this video, so you'll be able to watch this a little bit later. It usually takes a few days to get that up, but there will be a link there and you'll be able to get all of that as well.
Okay.
All right, does anybody have any other questions?
This was a great audience. I really, really appreciate the feedback on the coding stuff, guys. Really great stuff.
Yes, everybody did great. Well, as our way for more questions to come in, I want to say thank you, Tom. Great presentation, and again, keep in mind the millions and millions of Windows devices, and like Tom said, people that have Windows, they're desperate for apps. So this is a great opportunity, a very great opportunity. Don't ignore Windows, even though we're Xamarin developers. Don't ignore Windows. It's a huge market that we don't think about.
Ali kind of covered some of these points too. You want to kind of travel back to that Xamarin University lecture talk. I definitely check that out again. Like leverage the Xamarin lecture talks. Definitely take advantage of that.
Yes. Let's see. A couple more. Let's go through. Question. Was there a hamburger menu or something with a 10 icon? What was that? So Carl said he might have missed something.
Are you referring back to the products that I had inside my setup there?
I think so. So Carl, yeah, if you want to get some clarification on that.
Okay, so I can.
Is in your NuGets. Oh, right there, the templates. I think that's.
Yeah. So there is. Okay, if you want to look at a hamburger menu structure for Xamarin.Forms to run on Universal, James Montiago did the Hansel form project. Take a look at that. That's where I got some of these ideas from that. That's a good core project to kind of take a look at. I would definitely recommend that. What you're seeing on the screen here is that's a native template that I've added in. That's an open source template to create some of the back-end plumbing for when I'm doing native universal apps. So Jerry Nixon, he's a Microsoft evangelist. He created that along with several other people, and that's in GitHub. So that's where I've got that. So basically, when you're doing a search through GitHub template 10, that really helps out creating some of the plumbing code and some of the navigation services that you would normally bring into your application. So really, I just kind of start that up when I'm doing a universal. I'm hoping that maybe the Xamarin community can kind of address that need and kind of create a project similar to that. So maybe you guys can kind of kickstart that.
Yeah, and I just put 2 links to that in the chat window. So if anybody's interested in that, the first one is basically the description of it, and then the second one is, I think, where you download it.
Yeah, that's a very good project to kind of get at. It's like I said, it's very stable, right out of the box. I get the hamburger menu. And like I said, if you want to see that in Xamarin.Forms, I would definitely check out James Montiago's GitHub and look for the Hanselman application, and that kind of talks about how to set up the navigation. That's a little bit more elaborate project, but it's probably take a look at this example, then kind of tackle that one next.
Yeah, let me find that link. So,
Yeah,
okay, got it right here.
That had some good examples of using static properties kind of control to know when you're in which application or which client application to kind of control the look, which is good. Hopefully I'm not asking too much that the Xamarin.Forms team adds in adaptive triggers next. I'm hoping maybe it's a user voice. Maybe I may have to upvote that.
And Kyle has a question: is the grid control still an issue on Windows 10 for Xamarin.Forms? Do you know?
I didn't. I don't know what the issue is. I haven't actually looked at the example here. I was hoping to look at Mark's. Mark put together a wrap panel, so I may not be talking the same what Kyle's asking for. I didn't encounter the issue, but again, I used the list view control here. There is no grid view control inside Xamarin.Forms, but I believe I was kind of navigating through the forums. They talked about several projects where they're using a wrap panel. So I know Mark had put together an example, and I was going to take a look at after this talk to kind of see what's involved in that. Because again, I want to have a little bit more control on, if I'm in my universal app, I want to kind of take more advantage of that, that real estate to kind of give my content a little bit more breathing room and add a little bit more stuff. So I don't really think I addressed Kyle's concern. Maybe you can elaborate what the issue is.
And that might be again a question for the Xamarin.Forms team as well.
Yeah. Yeah, take advantage of the Xamarin.Forms. Like I said, when I encountered issues, went there, issue was resolved, which is great.
And Aaron asks, is there a workaround for targeting different screen sizes?
There is. It's a little bit complex. I didn't really want to tackle it. I'm going to probably point you to the Xamarin.Forms, and I apologize for that. Hopefully I can kind of bring that up as I'm going to upgrading the talk here. There are workarounds, but they're a little bit code heavy. So I didn't really want to kind of tackle that in this case because it's kind of like a quick introduction to it.
So at the easiest level, could you just use something like a relative layout?
Yeah, you can.
It's not going to change the layout too much, but it at least will scale responsive.
Yeah, I didn't, like I said, I didn't leverage that here. And one of the things I want to look at is Mark's code as far as the wrap panel control, or at least the concept there. I probably suspect that's probably what he's using there in that one. But again, I didn't have time to kind of add it into this talk. But I may have another tweak to the demo code in my GitHub repo.
All right. Well, as always, like I said, thank you so much. Great presentation. And
Great audience.
for everyone still on the line, remember these, like I said, these guest lectures are recorded. We will have these up within a few days. They are exclusively available to you, the Xamarin University students and community. And thank you, everyone, for attending. Thank you once again, Tom, for putting this all together and enlightening us on Windows UWP apps. Our next guest lecture is going to be St. Patrick's Day, March 17th, and it's going to be, I'm going to butcher his name, I'm sorry, Martin Van Dijk. I think that I'm sure I'm butchering it. We're going to be talking about MVVM Cross, and MVVM Cross has just released version 4.0. Big architectural and refactoring changes, things like that, and we're going to dive into that, and that's going to pretty much complete our series on the different MVVM frameworks that we can use in the Xamarin ecosystem. So I encourage you to sign up for that one. Should be great. And again, thank you everyone else, and we will see you next time.
Thank you, everyone.